Hi, I'm Tamara Zoner. Welcome to Spirit Cafe. Come in, sit down, and grab a cup of love. Well, hello there. It's Tamara Zoner, your host of Spirit Cafe. Welcome to another episode. Today we're talking to Jennifer Moore, who calls herself a former emotional hot mess and world-class awfulizer. She supports other highly sensitive, intuitive women to release empathic overwhelm and distress so they can access their inner wisdom and power. I am very excited to speak to Jennifer, who also holds a master's degree in psychology and religion and is a master trainer of EFT. As you know by now, one of my favorite tools, emotional freedom technique. Let's welcome Jennifer to the show. Welcome, Jennifer. Thank you for being here on Spirit Cafe. Why don't you start us off by telling us a little bit about you and what got you here today at with Empathic Mastery?
Oh, thank you so much for having me. And I just realized I didn't ask you, are you Tamara or
Oh,
Tamara?
thank you so much for asking that question. It is Tamara.
Okay. I know, well, I grew up so I guess starting way back, I was a highly sensitive, empathic child growing up in New England area, actually in Massachusetts. And so people always called me Jennifer. So I really,
Jennifer, tell us about you.
Jennifer, tell me about it. I think I'm particularly sensitive to how you pronounce your name.
I
Um,
appreciate that a lot.
yeah,
Some
yeah,
people I'll introduce myself and then they'll pronounce it however they feel like it.
right, right. Some people just, it doesn't really register,
Yep.
you know?
Yes, they hear what they
Yeah,
want to.
yeah.
So, all right, good. Tell us about yourself, Jennifer.
So, I am the author of the book Empathic Mastery, a 5-step system to go from emotional hot mess to thriving success. And I was the emotional hot mess and world-class awfulizer. I also am a master trainer for EFT International. And so I teach not only do I work as an EFT practitioner, but I also teach other people how to be impeccable EFT practitioners. And I know you love the tool as much as I do. I think it's absolutely spectacular. And when I am not either writing or tapping with people, I am the sort of head mistress of the Empathic Mastery Academy and Fairy Godmother apprenticeship programs. And I just basically teach people how to use their sensitivity, how to control their sensitivity, how to get out of taking on all the thoughts, feelings, energy, sensations from the world around them, to actually being able to self-regulate, to soothe and calm their nervous systems down, and then to actually be able to start being part of the solution.
Mm.
So for me, it's kind of like all about empaths, all day, every day, because that is where I come from. And the difference between being debilitated by taking on all of the thoughts, the feelings, the energy, the sensations from the world around me, to being able to recognize what's mine, what's not mine, and
Mhm.
actually start doing something about it and doing something different has been such a game changer that I knew that I wanted to be able to share this with other people too, because like if I can help one other empath not struggle the way I did, then I have succeeded.
I love that so much. And I I have taken issue with people claiming to be empaths who use it as an excuse to just not handle life.
Mm-hmm.
And I've met people who, oh, I just feel so much and it's just too hard to be in this space, like their job. And, and I'll say, well, maybe this is an opportunity for you to practice some boundaries and to practice, right? So tell us the difference between being an empathetic person and being
Mm-hmm.
an empath.
Okay. So so let's start with so first off, what I want to say is that in my experience, empath, empathy, empathetic, sympathetic,
Mhm.
compassionate, loving, even to the point of narcissist, sociopath, psychopath, is all a spectrum of connectivity that we have,
Mm.
and of openness to receiving what is going on in the world outside of us. And as well as to our ability to relate to other people, to understand other people, to communicate effectively with other people. And so, my starting with sort of the definition of empath, and what I will say is, I totally hear you. I think that the word empath has become like a buzzword in our culture. It's become very, very
Mhm.
popular. I mean, there's so much conversation about like the empath and the narcissist.
Right.
And it's often, oh, poor widow empath who has this awful relationship with the horrible narcissist. And the thing is, you're right. There's boundaries that need to be looked at. There's a lot of stuff that we need to be thinking about. And and what I would say is if somebody is really miserable at their job and they're using being an empath as their excuse, maybe they need to look at the fact that they're just really miserable at their job and either set boundaries to feel more comfortable if it's where they're supposed to be, or maybe look at finding a different job that is more aligned for them. But but anyway, an empath is a person from my or a being, because it could be a creature, a dog,
Mhm.
cat,
Oh
other
gosh,
kind
they're
of
so
animal too.
empathic.
They're so empathic.
Yeah.
And so an empath is somebody who is picking up the thoughts, the feelings, the energy, the sensations, the pain, the struggles, from the world around them sometimes. And it can be a spectrum of like either maybe they're just a little bit sensitive to their boss, so whenever they go to work their boss is having a hard day, they're feeling it.
Mhm.
Or it could be that they are very sensitive to all of the people around them, or they could be sensitive to not only the people but the environment and the geopathic stress. And then you've got people who start being sensitive to like the, sort of extending rings of awareness, and people who are so sensitive that they're picking up energy that is coming globally, that they're just
Mhm. Mhm.
absorbing things and understand and knowing things. And even beyond that, you can have people who are sort of not even fixed in time but able to sense things that are coming from the past, coming from the future. A lot of times in my experience, stuff that is intense or tragic will send ripples from the future into the past, and empaths will feel that emotional shock wave. So, empaths, the challenge about being an empath and sort of the distinction between empath and empathic, and especially having empathy,
Mhm.
is that having empathy means the ability to imagine ourselves in somebody else's shoes and to have that feeling of compassion, that feeling of love, that feeling of sympathy for what they are going through. But empathy still recognizes that you are yourself and that person is that other person. What happens for empaths is that, unlike people with other kinds of extrasensory perception and abilities, is that where if somebody's a psychic or a medium or an intuitive or a channel, they're open to receiving information, but they know it's coming from another source.
Mhm.
Empaths process information through their own sensory filters and through their own awareness. And so often, what happens for empaths is that we experience things as if they are our own. And so the challenge for the empath who either has never identified as an empath because they grew up in a family system that has basically been saying, you're too sensitive, you're overreacting, you're taking it too personally, just get over it. What do you mean somebody's angry? Nobody's angry here. There's nothing wrong here. Pay no attention to the man behind the curtain.
Right.
And so, a lot of times for empaths, what happens is they've been the designated feeler. And this isn't, I will say everything that I say has contradictions or possibilities where this does not always apply. And also, the opinions expressed here are strictly those of the person who gives them. Take what
Mhm.
you like and leave the rest.
Mhm.
Um, but when somebody's grown up in a family system where they've been sort of the designated emoter or designated feeler, but they're also in a system that's in denial, what ends up happening is we start imagining that the problem is us, that we are broken, that we are oversensitive, that we're overreacting, and that we need to fix ourselves. When in reality, what is happening is that that is that we are picking up on things that other people may not want to acknowledge. They're trying to deny, but it's still going on from the outside. And when we cannot acknowledge that we're picking things up from the outside, then we are sort of barking up the wrong tree, trying to just fix ourselves. And so as a result, what can happen is that we just keep spinning our wheels. And I think when you were talking about like somebody where they're just ideally they need to set boundaries, absolutely need to set boundaries. And if you know you're an empath, then in my opinion, the next piece of work is about really starting to recognize what's mine, what's not mine, and not taking on other people's stuff. Now, I understand that if you're just listening to this and you're just barely beginning to sort of work with this, that idea of not taking on other people's stuff may feel absolutely impossible. And I will say that it's not like you just flip a switch, that it is a process and a journey. So, did that answer your question?
Yeah, definitely. Now you went through your own process because I love how you call yourself a former emotional hot mess and world-class awfulizer. So was that your own journey, learning how to
Absolutely.
feel out whose
Absolutely.
was whose?
Yeah,
Can you tell us a little bit about how you did that process to help other people who are maybe only
absolutely.
just now realizing they are an empath?
Right, right.
And
Yeah, so I grew up in a family that had sort of a weird relationship with emotions in the sense that on one level there was a lot of kind of just sort of proper New England stuff it all down, but on the other hand there was a way that if there was a big feeling going on, it was kind of like stop the world, I have to get off, I'm having an emotion. And my mom is somebody who was very emotional, very easily. She was very sensitive. I also believe is very intuitive and empathic. Um, and she believed that worry was the highest form of virtue, that worry was the way to care for people. And so I grew up around somebody who perseverated and worried. My mother also has classic ACEs, like adverse childhood experiences. And so my mother's like history of trauma absolutely affected the fact that she was hyper vigilant and anxious all the time. And so I grew up around somebody whose emotional intensity like was kind of like a radio signal just blasting in the house all the time.
okay.
And so I would be feeling these feelings of uneasiness and these feelings of confusion and these feelings of despair and just all these different feelings all the time. And I wouldn't have I wouldn't necessarily have a really good reason for it. And so by the time, and yet, I also was being told, you're growing up in the lap of luxury. You have everything that you need.
Mm.
You're like, eat your breakfast. There's starving children in Ethiopia. And so I was really confused why I was feeling the way I felt. And also was growing up in an environment where other kids knew I was different. And so where I really do believe that there is a difference between some of us and other people, and that
Mhm.
kids recognize different children. And so I was getting the message: you're weird, you're different, you're strange,
Mm.
you don't fit in, you suck at sports, which was really, really true. And so I didn't necessarily have any answers. And so personally, by the time I was like 9, 10 years old, I discovered sugar was making me feel better. And so I was turning to food as a way to
Mm.
self-soothe, as a way to kind of navigate the world, as something that gave me some comfort. As I got older, I discovered drugs and alcohol. As I got older, I also discovered sex. And I was just constantly looking for validation, a place where I fit in and where I belonged, where I could be acknowledged, but also where I could experience like emotional relief, usually through distraction.
Mhm.
And if you've ever been on any of these sort of self-soothing, self-medicating paths, then you know that this does not really work very well.
Right.
And so by the time I was in my early 20s, I had quit smoking, gained 40 pounds within 4 months, was really out of control with my sugar addiction and with my with sort of an eating disorder and a lot of body distortion and everything. And I was miserable. And so it was my own inability to function that sort of started me on the path of recovery. And I initially started within the 12-step programs with
Okay.
food addiction with OA, and learned that sugar was a drug. I was only 23 when I learned this the first
Wow.
time, and something resonated for me. Now, this may not be true for absolutely everybody, but I do find that for a lot of us who are highly sensitive and empathic, that sugar really amplifies our already oversensitive system.
Mm.
And so giving up sugar was really one of the most important first steps that I could have possibly taken, because it allowed me to start not be it turned down the volume of the sort of, it's almost, sugar is known to cause a great deal of inflammation, and I
Mhm.
think it doesn't just cause physical inflammation, but it causes emotional and empathic inflammation as well.
Oh,
So it
okay.
really dial down the inflammation enough that I could start looking at myself. I could start looking at my boundaries. I could start looking at all kinds of stuff and really think about what was going on. And that led me to working with a spectacular psychotherapist who happened to be very intuitive, psychic, and empathic, who started to help me recognize, like realize that about 75% of the time that I was coming to her in a state of distress, it was after an encounter or something was going on with somebody else who was in a state of distress. So she started to help me discern
Mhm.
like what was mine and what was not mine. And so probably because of just, my astrological chart, my human design, all the other things, I am just naturally gravitate towards, when something's been given to me, I want to share it with other people.
Mhm.
And so as I started to experience relief, I felt utterly called to support other people and to share these tools with other people as well.
Mhm.
I also had a great deal of not only empathic ability or sensitivity, but a great deal of intuitive abilities and psychic abilities. So when I got out of art school, I basically put up my shingle as an intuitive and started reading tarot cards as sort of
Okay.
my first career. But what was fascinating about that was that I quickly, because I was doing my own personal recovery work, I became really interested in why were people making the choices that they were making. So instead of just saying things like, "Oh, you're going to meet this tall, dark, and handsome, man," actually, my favorite joke is, "You're going to meet a tall, dark cesspool and fall in." I started to become really curious, like, so what is it about your dynamics and your history and your stuff that's causing you to constantly be attracted to these cesspools and falling in over and over again?
Mhm.
And from that question, like the way I started reading, I went from predictive reading to much more sort of investigative reading. And from that, I realized, it's okay, it's one thing to know these things, it's another to do something about it. And
Mhm.
so that's what really started to compel me to develop my chops as a healer, and just doing things to help people move beyond just knowing what was going on. And I
Right.
think you were saying earlier, you've got these people who are like, I'm such an empath, I can't handle this. It's like, this is that problem. It's like, if you just know you're this, but you don't have
Mhm.
any tools to work with it,
Right.
it is debilitating.
Yeah.
It is exhausting. It is overwhelming. And a lot of times it's kind of like getting caught in an undertow where you really don't know what end is up.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah.
big answer.
Yeah. Okay, now I wanna go back. What is your astrological sign and your human design?
Okay, so I am in human design. I think I 6'3", and I'm a projector.
Okay.
And a lot of things make a lot of sense to me understanding about projector, because like sort of one of my kind of stories is like that I'm wearing a cloak of invisibility, and like Sisyphus, I'm pushing the boulder up the hill and will constantly be doing this, and understanding that I need to be like that it's about, and my most successful business ever was one where I just basically shone the beacon and people came to me, and it was like
Right.
it was just being invited. I completely understand the strategy. And
Mhm.
then in terms of my astrological sign, I'm a Capricorn sun. I was actually born on Christmas Day.
Okay.
That's a whole other number, let me tell you. But I was born on Christmas Day. I'm Capricorn sun with a Sagittarius moon. I was born right before the new moon. So it was
Wow.
Capricorn sun, Sagittarius moon, and Virgo rising. And if you
Oh, you
really
know
want to get
all the
into it,
details.
I
I'm
do
a
know all the
Capricorn.
details.
We're
Oh,
both, yep.
wonderful.
5 days
Yeah.
later, I was born. I mean, I don't know what
Woo!
year, but
Yeah.
December 30th here.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then, so did all that questioning then lead you into psychology? Because I see that you're also, uh,
So ironically, so all that questioning actually originally led me to seminary to get a master's degree, to get a master's of divinity.
okay.
I was like, I had been doing the work as an artist and a psychic and doing like a lot of spiritual teaching and leading. And but I was having a really hard time. I was in the Boston area. I was young. I was clueless. I didn't really understand a lot about running a business. I was just going by the skin of my teeth and try and sort of like one or two books, but we're talking like the late 80s, early 90s, especially when there wasn't a lot of information about how to run a successful business, not
Mhm.
like what we have now.
Right.
Now you can get course fatigue. Like now
Oh, yeah.
you could die from all, like you could go bankrupt from all the courses you could
You can
purchase.
definitely go bankrupt. Yeah.
Yeah. Whereas then
Every
it
business
was
book in the
like you
world.
could buy one or two books. What color is your parachute? And I think I had one book that was like, this thin, that was called like the Medicine Woman's Guide to, Successful Business.
Okay.
So there wasn't a lot of information out there. And so I had gotten to the point where it was like I knew that I wasn't able to do what I was doing effectively. So I decided to go to graduate school and get a master's in divinity, because I figured I would become either a parish minister or more likely a community minister doing work around body-centered spiritual healing. Talk about trying to do something way ahead of its time.
Yeah.
Like, and I was only in my I was in my early 30s at that point in
Okay.
time. So I was a young whippersnapper, not a lot of people taking me very seriously. So midway through graduate school, I realized that the MDiv was not for me, that ministry, the thing about ministry is that while on paper I agree with a great deal of it, in reality, in practice, it is very political, and it is
Mhm.
very, very much about um, diplomacy, but also dealing with power differentials and also dysfunctional family systems and family like one of the things, at least for me, and I know that there are brilliant ministers. I've many friends who are in the ministry that I really deeply respect. I just knew for myself I was not cut out for the heavy emotional lifting,
Mm.
that but especially the strategic and the boundary lifting and the stuff around interpersonal dynamics, because I think a lot of people look to the minister as their parent, and depending on the relationship they've had with their parent, it can either be
Yes.
good or not so good.
Okay.
And I realized I was not cut out for that, that it was just not my thing. And so I switched my major midstream over to a master's degree in psychology and religion. Then, right after that, though, I took a massive pivot, but that's another story.
Okay. And then, as you were talking about what was going on for you with all of the addiction to sugar and whatever else, anything that would distract you from what you were really feeling, whether it was yours or someone else's. How did you come upon EFT? 'Cause it sounds like a perfect fit for you.
So I had been, I'd been working in breath work for years and years and years. I'd studied transformational breath work. I was a Reiki master. I had
Okay.
done a shamanic apprenticeship. So I was already on the path. And I basically was very fascinated with, and I've always been really fascinated with like eating well. Once I stopped eating like total CRAP,
Hmm.
I really made a commitment to taking care of my body and eating foods that don't harm my body, because I deal with autoimmune stuff, and I'm a chronic Lyme survivor and all kinds of other things like that. So I've really
Okay.
needed to take very good care of myself. So anyway, I was subscribed to a newsletter, and the newsletter that I was subscribed to happened to be a proponent for EFT. And so for a couple of years, I kept seeing this newsletter continuously talk about how effective it was. And so I would check out Gary Craig's, who was the original founder of EFT. I would check out his website, but it was so complicated. And it involved, at the time, it was still using what's called the 9 gamut procedure. And it was using the rib point, the liver points
Oh,
underneath your
okay.
breasts on your rib cage, and doing things that were like, it just was complicated. So I would try it and it wouldn't really cut it. And then I would like put it away, and then I would try it again. But then basically a little bit, somewhere in the vicinity of 10, 11 years ago now, Gary changed the recipe. He simplified it. He took out all of the extra bells and whistles, and he made it what everybody knows is the basic recipe now.
Hmm.
And Gary changed that. And I happened to sort of see this thing in the newsletter and was like, oh, that's interesting. Checked it out. And then within maybe a few weeks, maybe a month or two tops, I happened to be driving in an ice storm with my husband. And I was like, and I have a history of car accidents. So I was very anxious and I was very distressed. And so I asked him if he would mind if I tapped, and I went from, and so he was like, yeah, knock yourself out. So as he's driving through like literally like 3, 4 inches of
Wow.
sleet, he was driving, I was sitting on the other side, and I was like, went from a 10 in just total like terror down to like a 0 of like, yeah, we could get into a car accident, we could even die, okay, I'll deal if it happens. And that was when I went, so there's something to this.
Hmm.
And being, I was already at the time had a healing business where I was actually doing tattooing as a healing art, and people would come to me from all over the place to put prayers on their skin and help truth and beauty surface.
Oh, wow.
And so this woman came to me very shortly after this experience. It was a little while later, but she came to me, and she had gone through a very tragic, very traumatic birth experience with her only son, where they both nearly died, but survived it. And I said, I know this thing. Would you be interested in trying it? And so I just led her through a few rounds of tapping, and she went from just like tens of terror and never ever imagining that she could have a child again, another child again, to within maybe, it was like, I don't think it took us more than a half hour, to, wow, maybe I could have kids again. And it was truly like life changing.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when I went, not only is there something to this, I need to learn about this, I need to train in this, and someday I'm going to teach other people how to do this too, because this is the bomb. And so that was sort of my introduction to EFT, and the rest has been a journey of being around other really skilled EFT practitioners, reading as much as I can read, watching as much as I can watch, um, talking as much as I can talk, exploring as much as I can explore, and tapping as much as I can tap.
Mm. Wow, it's amazing. What I find too is being intuitive really helps with the tapping when you're tapping with someone
Oh,
to give them
absolutely.
the words
Yes,
to really
yes,
connect. So that's
yes.
one of my favorite parts.
Except that there's a really important thing in terms of rapport, because there's a fine balance between picking up on what somebody is, what's true in their heart, and helping them to find the words for it, and getting into our own agenda and
Mhm,
offering reframes and using our language when we should be using another person's language.
mhm,
And so, one thing that as a teacher and a trainer that I really stress is how incredibly important it is to reflect a person's own exact language and words.
mhm.
So, as an intuitive, we have, and this was something I was trained in, is you need to be constantly mindful of where is the information coming from. Is this your ego trying to introduce, or is your agenda, your desire to rescue, coming in to sort of suggest words, or especially balance statements, and throwing in like cognitive shifts before somebody is ready
Mhm,
for it.
mhm.
That knowing, like, is this landing, is this meeting, are you meeting the person exactly where they are, or are you trying to drive the bus? Now there are there are more tapping practitioners, people who are into the broader concept of tapping, who do a lot of very positive tapping with affirmations and tapping on all the real positive stuff.
Mhm.
But in my experience, and with the people I've trained with, the thing is, we really need to acknowledge exactly what is the way it is
That's
first.
my favorite thing
Yeah.
about EFT. Like
Yeah.
when I only introduce it to clients who feel ready, who feel like this will be a fit. And if they don't like it, we don't keep doing
Yeah.
it.
Don't keep doing it.
Right? It's like I've got a whole toolbox here. We'll see which ones work for you. So with EFT, I'm always telling the ones that I introduce it to, like, this is where you get to tell the whole truth. You don't have to sugarcoat it, hold anything back. This is our
Mm-mm.
truth telling right here. And
Exactly.
that's what I love about
Exactly.
it so much. And that's why it helped me so much, because I got really real about what was going on for me and told all the truth. And I remember when I first started using it, it was about 10 years ago.
Hmm.
And would I would literally, like, I was a mom of very young children. My husband at the time would go to work. The kids would be down for a nap or at play school, and I would sit there tapping and sobbing and sobbing and sobbing and just
Yes.
release.
Yes.
It was like the
Yes.
most amazing things. If I
It
didn't
is
have 2 hours to
amazing.
tap, I wouldn't start.
Yeah. Yeah.
Even though that 5 minutes is good too, people. But
Exactly.
yeah, it
And
was,
especially for pain,
yeah.
5 minutes of tapping for physical pain can make all the difference in the world. And I had a lot of food sensitivities and
Mm,
environmental sensitivities when
hmm.
I first started tapping. And while I still eat a sugar-free and gluten-free diet, I can tolerate way more things than I used to be able to tolerate. 5 minutes of tapping, and I would be able to stop sneezing after I ate
Oh,
something.
wow. Oh,
Yeah.
that's brilliant.
Yeah.
I never really thought. I'm so about the emotional part and like stored baggage and releasing that I didn't even really. I know like headaches and like an immediate pain, but I didn't think like my stomach stuff.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Even not necessarily as effective, but I wasn't as diligent at it. But I've even gotten some support and help with hot flashes.
Oh,
Like,
wow.
mm-hmm.
Thankfully, I'm not there yet. Knock on
Yeah.
wood.
Yeah.
It's closing in, but
Oh, just you wait. Just you wait.
I
And
have
don't.
friends my age going through, and I'm just like,
Oh
well,
yeah, and
not yet.
it lasts for a good while. And
Oh,
something that people don't tell you, that I wish somebody had told me before it started to happen to me, is that another thing about perimenopause in particular is you lose your nouns for a really long period of time, where you're like, the thing. Would you go get me the thing? And apparently this is something cognitively our brains are rewiring, but this is something that happens to lots of women, is we lose our nouns. And
see,
I will
that
say,
is
I,
very interesting. I was
yep,
telling my kids, watch out for early onset dementia, because
yeah, no,
that's what's
it's
happening right now.
perimenopause, and
All
it
right.
is, and the wonderful thing is my nouns are back. It took a
Woohoo.
while, but my nouns are back. But yeah, hot flashes in July. Ooh,
Oh, oh man. Oh my
yeah,
gosh. Okay, I have another question for you, because
awesome.
I love this conversation, and you've got such a wealth of knowledge and wisdom. And I really want to circle back to where we started with empaths, because I feel like
Yes,
there are
please.
so many in the world who really are living as a victim because they don't know
They
what
don't
to do.
know.
They don't know, they don't realize that they are empaths, or the ones that I know do, but then they use that as like this badge of victimhood. And I want to empower them to be able to use it as a gift instead of a curse. And I think you even say something like that. So
Yeah.
and I know you have a tool, or you have a well, your book, Empathic
I have a book.
Mastery.
I have a book. Yeah. And the book is really, I mean, if you want a taste of the kind of way of the way I write and the tools that I offer, I do have a guide, which basically you can go over to empathicsensitivity.com to grab the guide and then get a drip sequence of sort of a mini e-course that comes
Nice.
through the email and everything. And also an invitation to join my free Facebook group where I do master classes every single month on the full moon.
Nice.
That's talking all about empathic mastery and how to work with it. But the big mama is the book, which is
Okay.
380 pages of how do you deal with this stuff. First part is about what does it mean to be an empath and why are we this way? And then the second part is the how, the 5 steps of empathic mastery, which is recognize, because we got to recognize, we got to recognize we're empaths first. Then we got to recognize what's ours, what's not ours, and or whether we're carrying stuff that's not ours, and then recognize what's not ours and not ours, and then start doing the detective work of, okay, so what does this really mean? Do I need to change my diet? Do I need to change my environment? Do I need to stop going to the grocery store at 5 o'clock on Friday afternoons? Do I need to set boundaries? Like where we really start looking at what do we need to do? There's release, which is all about letting go of the stuff that is not ours and is no longer serving us. Protect, which is about both energetic filters and shields to create boundaries so we're not taking on all the stuff and absorbing it, as well as emotional boundaries of I am not going to respond to that phone call or that text message from the drama queen at 10:30 at night, as well as strategic boundaries of, no, I do not do, like, I have a very clear boundary around my mornings because I am a zombie in the mornings. And I do not, under any circumstances, like bend over backwards to do certain things. Or like when I used to have the tattoo studio, Mondays was my day off, and under no circumstances would I come in on a Sunday or Monday. These were my boundaries.
Yes.
And so protect is about, energetic as well as emotional and strategic boundaries. Connect is all about the universe abhors a vacuum. And so in order to be able to really make a difference, we need to start connecting to a power greater than ourselves, and something that is bigger, that is more expansive, that is more spectacular than we alone can be, and especially our ego can be. And then from connect, we finally get to reach act, which is about how do we live our lives in a different way as an empowered empath, as opposed and a responsible empath, as opposed to a victim empath. As you can see, the journey is not necessarily like a light switch or a just do this and everything's going to be fine. And what I will say is that for my own personal experience, it has been an incremental process of coming to understand things. And as an EFT practitioner, I am sure you understand this metaphor or this concept. When you're talking about releasing something with EFT and you're using the SUDS, the subjective units of distress scale, we start maybe with a 10 if something's really, really intense. It doesn't go down to 0 with one round of tapping. It goes down to a 7. Then from that 7, maybe it goes down to a 4 or a 5. And then from that 4 or 5, maybe it goes down to a 3. Then maybe it goes down to a 2. Then maybe it goes down to a half a point. And then eventually it hits the 0. In the same way that we go from extreme distress as an empath to ultimately really grounded, calm, and yet still sensitive to the energy that is aware of the energy that is going on in the world around us and mostly not getting knocked over by it, that I guess I'd probably be in, like, I'd say personally, I'm probably in terms of like a 2.5, 3 of empathic sensitivity at this point, in terms of it being, or at least being debilitating for me. It's rare that it knocks me over anymore. But, the thing is that we have to understand that even the victory of recognizing that we are an empath and that the stuff that we're feeling bombarded with is not a sign of our mental illness or a sign of I mean, certainly there could be some mental health issues going on as well, but a lot of times what I've seen is that we are taking on things that are not ours, and a big part of the journey to well-being is not like saying no mas, not going to own your stuff anymore for you.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's a huge first step. And, and then we start learning how to have better boundaries. We start learning what our body needs. We start learning how to recognize what we have a tolerance for. Some people, I mean, just in the same way that you've got a scale in terms of introversion and extroversion, some people are more sensitive. Like, we need to be mindful of how we process stimulation. Like, and it's not uncommon for empaths to be kind of in the ADHD, sensory processing disorder. Like, there's a lot of like empath and neurodivergence are not unknown to each other. There's a lot of crossover. And so, if you know that you are highly sensitive, if you know that you have a lot of sensory processing stuff, like, then, I mean, for example, one of the dumbest things I ever did was I went to a concert without earplugs. And it was just like being in this at Fenway Park down in Boston with like this stadium full of people and a horn section that was just it was like, I wanted to crawl out of my skin.
Mm-hmm.
The solution was not necessarily to not go to the concert.
Okay.
The solution was to bring earplugs. But I didn't, but fortunately, the opening band was shrill and loud. The main line, or main, I can't think of the word. The headlining. Thank you. It's not mainlining. That's addiction. The headlining band their sound was mixed to absolute perfection. It was the Foo Fighters, and so back when Taylor was still alive, it was quite a spectacular concert, and their sound was mixed perfectly. But but before, I was just like beside myself. So sometimes it is about, this is not an environment that I belong in. Other times it's about, I need to adapt to meet my needs so that I can tolerate this environment.
Yeah. So much of our journey is about self-awareness and
absolutely
knowing how to honor ourselves, whatever we are, and whoever we are, just being aware of what serves us and what depletes us makes a vital difference in our everyday experience.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you so much. So is that empathicsensitivity.com the best place for everyone to find you?
Well, that's a way to get the guide, but honestly, the best way to find me is to jump on over to empathicmastery.com. And if you want a copy of the book, jump over to empathicmasterybook.com. But empathicmastery.com will lead you to the book. So, and that will also lead you to the podcast, which is the Empathic Mastery Show, and all kinds of other fun stuff.
Excellent. I will make sure to put all of that in the show notes.
Thank you.
And if you notice I haven't, because of my own ADHD, just message me. Excellent. Anything else that I always like to close this on? Like, if you could sum it all up in one short paragraph or a couple of sentences, like, what do people just need to know about this human experience?
I think that the most important thing I know that I needed to hear was that you are not broken, that you are perfect exactly as you are, that the information that you are receiving is coming to you for a reason, and it's okay to feel like a hot mess. It is okay to feel really, really distressed. We are living in wild times right now, and you're doing the best you can. Just keep going.
Beautiful. Thank you so very much, Jennifer. It's been a real pleasure to have you.
Tamara, it has been a blast. What a wonderful conversation.
Yay. Yeah. Thank you so much. All right, listeners, viewers, head over to Jennifer's websites, whichever one you choose. The links are all below somewhere, wherever you're listening or watching this. And I will talk to you again next week. Thank you. Bye. Thank you for joining us on Spirit Cafe. Please leave all comments on our Spirit Cafe Facebook page or in the comments below our YouTube videos.